All right. How's it going, everybody? So, we're here talking about whether or not socialism belongs in the Democratic Party. We planned on having 6 people here, but we're going to wait to see if our other guest is going to be joining us. So, for now, I'm going to go from left to right and introduce everybody. First, we have Edison Krause. Edison, where do you land on socialism belonging in the Democratic Party, and where do you land politically yourself?
Hey, Vince. All right, so I am a Democratic Socialist. I am actually chair of AD 71 in Riverside County's Democratic Party Central Committee. So I believe that, yes, it belongs in the Democratic Party. We unfortunately live in a two-party system. And the best thing we can do, the most realistic thing we can do, is pull the most left party further to the left. And that is the only realistic option you're left with.
Awesome. I'll be next. My name is Vince Bird. I myself am a socialist. I've been looking more into anarchism, and I still haven't figured out a way to shoot it down. So I think the further things go, I'm going to slide further and further to calling myself an anarchist. I'm definitely there with Edison. I believe that we realistically at this time have a two-party system, and we need to do everything we can to get the leftmost ideologies in place in the leftmost party as it stands. That is the Democratic Party. There's a lot that has to be done in order to get there, but I think socialism definitely has a place in the Democratic Party. Next, we have Animancer.
So I don't really ascribe to any political label because I kind of have this position, which I feel is kind of uncommon, that I feel like political labels are often like a barrier for progress to actually ensue. Especially like there's been an effective, there's been an effective campaign in this country, especially over the past few years, to make socialism a bad word, and it's just such a turnoff to people. Even though overwhelmingly a lot of these ideas which are associated with the term socialism, like Medicare for all and all these other times, when you actually like pull these numbers, like these policies are overwhelmingly fucking popular in this country. But when you frame it in a way with it's socialism, I feel like it scares off a lot of people. So that's the position I come from with it when it comes to trying to use that term in regards to the Democratic Party. Is that I feel like it's just gonna scare away too many people. If you actually talk about it policy by policy, then people are going to be a lot less afraid. But if you use that term blanket, like if you just go out and say I'm a socialist, I feel like a lot of people, at least early on, are going to be turned off by that.
Okay. And then next up, we have Sebastian.
Hi, I'm Sebastian. I guess I'd probably be pretty close to Vince in terms of definitely socialist, not sure if anarchist, but leaning in that direction. And I certainly, I guess on the topic of this conversation, I'd be of the mindset that it doesn't belong, but not necessarily because it shouldn't belong. I think it absolutely should, but I think by the time that we get it to be a core principle of the party, we will have enough people that it will no longer be the Democratic Party. It will be a new party that effectively replaces it. So I guess it's slightly nuanced, but yeah, that's my take on this.
And then last, we have Paul.
Hello, everyone. I have a different take. I call myself a progressive, and I'm from Florida. This is why I believe that socialism doesn't have a part in the Democratic Party. That doesn't mean we don't fight for Medicare for all, free college, and Green New Deal, but we cannot scare off people. We need those Hispanics. Hispanics aren't going to vote for socialists. We need to do it in a smart way that can pull people. And the reason why socialism doesn't have a place is they won't win in Florida. They won't win in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, in my opinion. Yes, the ideas are popular, but the Republicans and the mainstream media did a good job with framing socialism as bad. And it's going to take a long time for people to not be afraid of that term.
All right.
In Florida, He doesn't play
go
well,
on.
and we need progressives in Florida. Like, look at Alan Grayson. Alan Grayson's a progressive who didn't call himself a socialist. He was able to get Republican votes. He was able to work with Republicans. That's the type of thing we need, in my opinion.
Okay, so I think a lot of the issue that we have in framing this conversation a lot of the time is people don't even understand what socialism is. And just so we're all clear in this conversation amongst ourselves, what do you guys all call socialism? What comes to mind when you say the word socialism? Guess we'll start with Edison.
Well, I like the classic definition of the working class owning the means of production, basically, and that applies to unions, basically running any and all industries. As far as the role of government, it's not totally a communist government, but one that is more of a social administration that sees to fulfill everything that we as private citizens cannot, such as police, firefighters, education, healthcare, everything that we can't do by ourselves and that will be hindered by a free market. The government should intervene and be, unfortunately, yes, big daddy government that does it right, but it's a government that's supposed to be run by the people, that's supposed to be elected by individuals. So to me, that is a socialist utopia, basically.
Okay, so the way I define this is very far away from government, period. When I address government, I'm usually talking about an ideal government where, like Edison said, the politicians are actually supposed to represent the people. Our system is so broken at this point that we don't really have too much of that. We have a little bit, luckily, and we do still have elections for now, maybe. But when you're talking about like big daddy government, that is kind of what government is supposed to do. Government is supposed to look out for its people. They're supposed to pass laws. That's what a government does. Government is separate from the state. The state enforces those laws, and they have a monopoly on the use of force within their own borders. But when it comes to government doing things, I hate when people say, that's socialism. No, that's just a government being a government. Government does things because we vote for them to do things. Now, when I'm talking about socialism, I'm talking about, like Edison said, the old definition of workers controlling the means of production. Plain and simple. It's just a different economic environment from what we have now. And when people say, oh, well, we tried socialism in this place and it didn't work, that's not 100% true. What didn't work a lot of the time was when other factors were involved. Take authoritarianism and central planning. Even when I've seen studies on central planning, it wasn't even that central planning didn't work, per se. There were even more factors involved than that. It's more complicated than just saying, oh, socialism, that doesn't work because of, Venezuela. There were a lot of other factors involved other than just socialism. So yeah, when I'm talking about socialism, I'm purely talking about workers owning the means of production. And Sebastian? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm muted. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I would say two things. There's first the worker owns means of production, and then there's also the abolishment of the commodity form, to use effectively another sort of extension of the classical definition. However, certainly finding certain things at bare minimum, I'm not necessarily sure if we can really classify as like it's a question, I guess, where we have the linear definition between what is socialism elements in a democracy and what is effectively democratic elements in a socialist state. And effectively, eventually, what I want to get to is an anarchist state. But unfortunately, as long as you have states, you can't really exist in a world without them, as those with stated interests will absolutely take over those with non-state interests until you effectively can create a global state. And certainly in terms of like, yeah, government doing stuff isn't necessarily socialism, but having strong governmental safety nets are elements that trend towards that conclusion of socialism. So it's mostly a country effectively, as in the words of the Constitution, that works by or is of and or I've forgotten the exact terminology, but like a country that works for the people. I've forgotten the exact terminology of that sentence, but it's effectively of, by, and for the people is my general concept of socialism. And certainly it's something that you can absolutely argue through certain pathways, even in the original founding documents of this country, should have been a possible end goal. Unfortunately, so is fascism. So we have that whole can of worms to open. But yeah, basically, eventually I'd love to abolish commodity form, and I'd love to have certain things effectively not only taken over by the state, basic utilities, and abolishing the commodity form in those utilities, i.e., you can't make money from surcharging people for energy or surcharging people for water, effectively removing those from a moneyed interest and competitive nature between various spots. It also has weird, crazy side benefits, but we'll go into that later. So, yep, that's my dig.
And how about you, Paul?
Like regular people, before I watched the Humanist Report, my first instinct was Venezuela and Cuba, and I'm Hispanic, so that's why that. When I started to watch progressive news, I became educated. And again, Medicare for us isn't bad, but if you look at the Obama playbook in 2008 and 2012, he was able to win Hispanics and didn't think he's some crazy socialist. And I think that socialist label is going to harm us dramatically. And if you also look at Steve Bullock, he was able to win as governor twice and as an attorney general. The Senate campaign, he did kind of crappy, but I think the Obama, Grayson, and Bullock playbook is a way for us to win as progressives. I'm not saying Obama and Bullock are progressives, but they campaign as progressives.
Okay. I want to address something that Paul brought up. Specifically, what's up, Edison?
You skipped Annie answer.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you did skip.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, crap.
You did skip me, but it's okay though, because
Sorry about
it
that.
actually kind of plays into the point I wanted to make anyway. And not the fact that I got skipped over, but just the fact that, to me, kind of part of the problem is that our language works because we can have a conversation. You understand the words that I'm saying, like it conveys like thoughts to you, and it goes through your head, and you receive that knowledge. But when the word socialism is said, as we just saw by going through all these people, you all had pretty much a different definition of it in your head. You all explained it in a different way, at least. So when a word doesn't have a coherent definition that we all follow, hasn't it kind of failed as a piece of our language?
Yeah, kind of. That does make sense. Honestly, I kind of blame that much on the Cold War, all the propaganda that we had in this country and
I
through
agree.
a lot of Western countries because of that. And then the Republican Party hammering on how the Democrats are communists, and the funniest string of words that I always see conservatives use: the liberal communist Democrats.
Yeah, all of those things are different attributes, but they all see them as the same thing. That's the ironic part of it.
The funny part is Democrats are liberals. They're correct there, but so are the Republicans. They trend in opposite directions from there, but they are both liberals. And then the fact that anybody thinks the Democratic Party is inherently communist is laughable. But I did want to move into something that Paul was pointing out, where ignoring the Republican half of Florida, he's pointing out places where they're swing states. We have a lot of people that will drift from one major part of the party to the other. I know a lot of people like to talk about third parties, but we all seem to be in agreement that we have two major parties. That's the way it's going to go. And this big block of voters in the middle will trend towards one or the other when it comes to everything there. So when we're messaging to those voters in the middle, as people that do want to see the Democratic Party push to the left, how do we do that? Like Damon pointed out, the word socialism just scares people right away. That's not really up for debate. We've all seen it. In fact, on Twitter earlier, I was being berated that people from countries that have seen socialism would kick my ass if they knew I was uttering the words that I was saying. And all I'm doing is saying, hey, maybe we should pay people fairly for shit that they do. But that's socialism. So how exactly do we message to these people? We don't necessarily have to go around in the same circle. Anyone who wants to jump in, go for it. We can go back to the circle if we start talking over each other.
Well, we frame it like this. You all want high wages. So do I. That's why I support $15. You all want better healthcare. That's why healthcare is the way. That's why to lower prescription drugs. That drives Medicare for all. No one's going to wrestle insulin. You have to be as clear as possible. Having labels attached to it is going to turn people off. And if you call us socialists, then people are going to have this crazy perspective that all Democrats want to ban fracking when that isn't the truth, which I want to happen. Like my aunt from Florida thinks Biden's going to ban fracking. I'm just keep looking at it in shock because he's not going to do that. So if you have those labels, then it's going to harm the whole party. And again, I got to look at the way Obama did it. Obama called out the outsourcing Republicans did. He called out the corporatism, the elitism that they had, and he was able to win. He was able to win in Florida. And in 2008, when he ran a Hope and Change, he was able to win Indiana, North Carolina. So if we frame ourselves as populist, Hope and Change, middle class progressives, I think that play well.
Well, I would want to make a small distinction. I think candidate Obama and President Obama are effectively should be talked as different people. But yeah, candidate Obama definitely was far more open to these possibilities. I would also want to add the general sentiment of being able to explain socialist concepts in very much plain speak for a large group of people who may or may not be averse to socialism as a concept, but are okay with the ideas that it would produce from that, may also be open to these kinds of arguments. And I definitely think having someone who is effectively charismatic, direct, and seems open and honest as sort of a figurehead to push that in, or even a group of people eventually, hopefully, as we start to get more and more people, or at least amenable, if not openly embracing and pushing these concepts, will absolutely be a huge benefit to the areas in which it effectively helps people. And once they start to understand certain things as being a strong, effectively, we almost have to sell the strong governmental safety net to be able to bypass that thing, bypass effectively the animosity, or at least that's what I would hope would be the start, would be that we just start with we want to make sure that the government works for you, because for me, one of the biggest gripes I have is the whole taxation narrative that the Republicans seem to be getting away with phrasing, where government doesn't work for you, so we have to defund government programs so government can't work for you because it doesn't have enough funding to do so, and effectively puts all this taxation as a negative term, as opposed to saying we want government to work better for you, and to do that you have to put more in, but everyone gets a lot more out. Your benefits vastly outweigh your costs. If you were able to put in $1,200 into a system and got $7,500 back, that's basically a casino that always gives you good rewards from doing so. And I feel like that has to be sort of a core selling point in this, is that you can just repeatedly tell them, hey, we're going to get you better benefits. We're going to make the government work for you as opposed to not working for you. And really kind of dispel this neoliberal brainworm that like taxing the middle class is inherently a bad thing, as opposed to we want the middle class and the working class, especially because I think people really overestimate just how poor working class is and just how poor middle class is. If you actually look at, we even have these data sets that show like the relative disparities of this sort of, I guess it would be this way, sorry, the income curve and like how much goes to that highest part, like what people think of the where middle class is and where it actually is. Like $30,000 a year is crazy low. Like our current minimum wage federally is $15,080 per year without that discount. So really kind of reclassifying this as like, yeah, unfortunately, even if we do tax the shit out of everyone who's making a ridiculous amount of money, which we absolutely should, it still won't give us enough money to properly fund every single program that we want to have enacted to provide a strong social safety net for all of America. We're going to have to raise taxes on other people too, and that's okay, because everyone below a certain margin gets giant benefits. So you're just selling a different message. So I guess that's kind of like, I feel like that's a stronger message, but it's all sort of still theoretical, just because in some cases you have to get really, really, really dumbed down. Like you basically say, if you could play the lottery and throw in $1,200 and get 8,000 back, would you do it? And as stupid as it sounds, that's the kind of benefits that we could be talking for people, and we could do it even on an individual level, but it's going to require a concept I was mulling around in my head last week, actually, for a information distribution network to coincide with local representation, to be able to properly inform the populace and effectively start by saying like, hey, you remember that $1 trillion infrastructure package that Obama promised in both terms, and that $1 trillion infrastructure package that that Trump promised, and that $1 trillion eventually, theoretically, that Biden promises?
Yeah, it's
What
never going
happened
to
to
happen.
those? Yeah, you effectively have to remind them, like, what happened to that? That's really weird. That sucks. Your roads still suck. What's going on with that? But
Want to know why that's such a problem, though? It's because when it comes to bipartisan issues, like let's talk about. I give usually two big examples, things that are bipartisan issues that at this point most Democratic and fucking Republican voters can agree on. Is that weed should be legal. Most Republicans are coming around to the idea that we should just have federally legal marijuana, and also infrastructure is important. This is something that, like you just said, Obama and Trump, they both came out and talked about and did nothing about. Because when it comes to bipartisan issues, especially these days, increasingly so over the past fucking decade or so, they go nowhere. They go absolutely nowhere because the two main parties are too busy batting back and forth these partisan issues that'll never go anywhere. So they never have any conversations about things that they could work together on, like those two issues I just mentioned. And there's way more. One just came to my mind, and this is really relevant to right now. A second stimulus package. Most Americans want a second form of stimulus, but both parties are too busy fucking, digging their heels in the sand to actually get anything done about that. And people are rightfully pissed off. And this shit's just going to keep fucking happening because we're more divided in this country than we ever have been before. Besides the fucking Civil War.
So, going back to the question of how do we get people to accept these, to be more accepting of socialism and socialist programs, For starters, I want to disagree a bit with Paul as far as yes, socialism has been attached to communism for a long time and the Red Scare and all that. It's a very demonized word in America, but ultimately the right will always demonize anything. I mean, once progressives came out right now, oh, progressives are the worst. They're calling liberal communists. A liberal is a bad thing according to Republicans, but they're liberals themselves. But they use any single label that you can to berate the work that you're doing. And it's always going to be government handouts, and it's always welfare and more taxes. And taxes scare people because if you tax somebody before giving them something, they will not accept it. And again, as far as what Sebastian was saying, I do agree that these programs should be funded by the middle class as well, but you can't take from them before giving it to them. I'm a big fan of pilot projects. I think the government doesn't do enough to present pilot projects as saying we'll grab a random 1,000 people and show you how this system works. If it works and you like it, then people will be fighting over whether or not they'll want it and vote for it in. And the way to talk to people about it again is, as you mentioned, Republicans and Democrats are both sucking in Congress and in the Senate. And it's turning the narrative into an us versus them situation. We have to turn it the bottom versus the top. That's the only way it's going to be. The corporate elites, and this is on the Democratic and Republican side, they benefit from us fighting over whether we're Democrats or Republicans on the simple
100%.
On only basically the only premise is pro-life and pro-choice. That's the only thing that separates Democrats and Republicans, and that's where you cannot talk about anything, and they use that one conversation to separate us. So we kind of have to get past this, and that's a whole other conversation. But understanding that every single other aspect of life, medicine, roads, even law enforcement, everybody agrees that it should be accessible, it should be just, and we're not getting it. So I think one of the best ways to actually promote these programs is kind of like what the Democratic Socialists of America are doing. They're not a political party. They're actually just elevating local candidates and distributing the information rather than shoving it down your throat like you're a racist if you don't vote for the Democrat, or you know what, you hate babies if you vote for the Democrats. So we do have to start at a local level. I think that's the only thing you can do. Talk to a lot of people, knock on a lot of doors, support local candidates. And it sounds like incrementalist bullshit, but that's the only way we've ever gotten anything done in this country.
That's the only way there's going to be any change at all, unfortunately.
Exactly. And a lot of work. And that's the problem. A lot of people and I love this. I love this new young trend because this is where it's born. I was raised with punk rock. I'm all about burn it all down and build it back up. But that's not how things get done. That's not how we have science. That's not how we have technology. That's not how we have civilization. But a lot of young people right now, we want it all. And I would love to have it all, but you're not going to get there. You didn't have gay rights by just suddenly saying, you know what, I think all the gays are cool. No, the gays fought for a long freaking time to get where they are now. Women fought for their rights for a long time. People of color, of all colors and races and ethnicities, they've fought for a long time. They still haven't gotten it. They're still fighting for the same things they were fighting for 50 years ago. So if you want these programs, these genuinely good programs, where your heart's in it, like what Marianne Williamson was calling the politics of love. You want an empathetic government, you have to work for it. You have to be involved. And unfortunately, there's so many of us, and we're so easy to persuade that it's really hard to reach individuals. So that's my take on the question, is just pounding the streets, working with local activists, and educating. Education is key.
Can I have a quick response about access? I think that would be political suicide. Saying that raising taxes on the middle class and lower class would be political suicide, and it will destroy any progressive chance of winning in Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. I have the privilege of having this perspective because I myself was kind of arrogant. I was kind of in that neoliberal bubble because I didn't see shows like The Humans Report and The Young Turks and David Pakman and Rational Nation. And when I heard that Bernie was going to raise taxes, it kind of was unappealing to me because I thought, well, my mom has 2 jobs already. She has to get another job because rent's too high. What if she has to get another job because taxes are going to get higher. So if you understand that perspective, I think that's a way of winning. If you say, hey, we're not going to raise your taxes, and in order to make things less, or in order to make sure you don't have to get multiple, we're going to make sure you have higher wages, you have health care. And another thing we have to do is, as progressives, is we need to unite with the neoliberal when it's important. Like in 2016, if we united with Clinton, we wouldn't have Amy Coney Barrett, we wouldn't have Brett Kavanaugh, we wouldn't have to fight back to redo all the progress that's made under the Obama administration. In order for progressives to win, sometimes we have to align with the neoliberals in order to not have to fight back for the progress that we have to redo now that Biden is president. Because now this talks about will we wait getting rid of, this talks about getting mayors getting rid of. So we have to find a way to align ourselves and figure out which battle we want more. Do we want to fight for all the progress we have and have to go to that same fight instead of making new progress, or do you want to build on what we have and push for better stuff?
I'm going to push back on two things there. One, we absolutely know from what Mitch McConnell said prior to the 2016 election that he was not going to confirm or even bring up 4 votes any nomination by Hillary Clinton. He was willing to stonewall for the first full 4 years. So in all likelihood, we probably would end up having either a justice that was so far to the right being nominated and then not being confirmed, or we would have 7 currently. And the second thing that I would also push back on is the concept that, like, electoralism is absolutely worth utilizing when it suits you, but at the same time you have to be willing to actually effectively stand up when it doesn't. And
but here's the problem, though. Had we had a President Clinton, we wouldn't be dealing with COVID-19. We could focus on Medicare for all. We could focus on the Green New Deal, free college. Now
I'm going to push back on that as well.
I mean, we'd still be dealing with COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes, but it would not be as bad now. We would have masks already being mandated. We already have enough testing. We wouldn't have over 200,000 deaths, in my opinion. I'm ready to bet money on that.
We don't know that, though.
Yeah, so rather than like debate on whether or not Hillary would have been better than Trump, I think we can.
I'm not debating on that. My point is we got to pick our battles and be smart, and we also have to have better things, because higher taxes, as one answer progressives, won't work in Florida.
I agree. I would like to highlight what Edison said with the pilot projects, because we've kind of already seen that. You know how everybody always says, like, when one state goes against the federal norm, legalizing weed. Where was the first place that did that? Was it Colorado?
Yep.
Yeah. So Colorado does it first, and then all of a sudden states start dropping down like crazy. Oregon just decriminalized all drugs, I believe it was.
Yeah, all drugs, yes.
To be fair, California decriminalized first, but did not legalize before Colorado.
Okay, but still,
215 was first.
Once it started, it didn't stop. Once it took hold and people saw, oh, hey, this really isn't all that bad, it'll keep going. Once you give people a taste, they want more. So I like the idea of running on socialism without saying socialism. And then
I agree.
Especially if we work locally, the easier to obtain offices rather than going straight for a Senate run or going straight for a presidential run. As excited as I am that a whole bunch of people got behind Bernie and really wanted him to be president, we shouldn't be trying to do this top down.
It's a good
We-
sign of the future. Yeah, and that's what, you know what, that's also a big problem that a lot of third parties have in this country. Third parties could be successful in this country if they built from the ground up, but they refuse to do so. They're always like, yeah, we're just going to go for the presidency, something that'll never possibly feasibly happen. And that's a big criticism I have of third parties. Is why do they even waste time on a presidential campaign? They waste fucking their donators' money when they could invest that money into locally getting into offices that they could actually obtain.
I'll push back on that only slightly. Electorally, I think third parties are a complete waste of time. But realistically, where did the Green New Deal come from? That was
I'm pretty
from
sure
the
it came
Green
from a
Party.
No,
What-
I'm pretty sure it came from like a think tank in the UK. I'm pretty sure I read that a long time ago. It's actually
Well,
it's
in-
not from the Green Party.
But in the U.S., the first legislation that was written was from the Green Party.
Yeah,
Now,
from Howie Hawkins. I'm
So
pretty sure.
AOC picked it up, and she made it popular, and he's whining that she watered it down. But, I mean, you have more people today talking about climate change than you did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So, overall, we're trending in the right direction.
Okay, so does anyone disagree with the fact that Howie Hawkins sucks? I just want to ask that question. Like, does anyone here like disagree with that?
I don't.
I think he was a terrible fucking choice. Honestly, he has no charisma. The only thing he did was go out there and be like, "Vote for me," because I'm like Bernie. Oh, meanwhile, while the actual Bernie Sanders is there telling people to bite the bullet and to go vote for Biden. Like, what kind of a campaign was he putting together?
I thought Jesse Ventura should be the nominee. I think he would have made things much more interesting.
There was a big drama about that too. Yeah, I think most people wanted Jesse Ventura to be the nominee, but a lot of people think that because like Howie was the Green Party co-founder, that he just kind of forced himself in. And there's been some other people who have kind of like alleged that as well, like this other guy Dario Hunter, who I've had a conversation with before on Twitter, who is like the person who got the second most votes in the Green primary, and he seems to believe that it was thoroughly rigged. So.
To be honest, who cares? Honestly, it was the Biden-Trump election. No one was gonna. I mean, no third-party candidate was gonna be even close.
That's what I'm talking about.
so
Like that.
honestly-
I don't know why the third parties bother. I don't know why they waste their time.
So
just a fall
third
guy.
parties are viable in places like Maine, where
And you get
they have
paid.
ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting is going to be huge for like the potential of third parties on a local level.
Although
Yeah.
I will mention that with Maine, specifically in the last elective cycle, there are a couple of weird scenarios in which ranked choice voting effectively turns into first past the post. And unfortunately, with the last cycle, that's exactly where we ended up because somehow Sarah Gideon, despite all of the sort of the factors trying to prop her up, she didn't even hit 50%. And when you have one person who's over 50%, none of the ranked choice part, like there are effectively two terrible scenarios with ranked choice voting where it turns into first past the post. And that's effectively one of them unfortunately occurred.
Well,
And
yeah,
my
but
big question becomes like, how do we adapt that for the next cycle so we don't end up like I think it's an outreach question, but it's just the question of like, I certainly think that ranked choice voting would be a massive improvement, but I think it also has to be coupled with mixed member proportional redistricting for it to really be effective at being able to get third parties out of being effectively electorally
Well, maybe we
relevant
can do this.
comparatively.
Maybe we can say, hey, instead of reaching 50%, the second vote gets counted no matter what percentage you have. Maybe that could be a way to help out. Maybe.
well, okay. So if we're
Possibly,
talking about a democratic election, if more than 50% of the people vote for somebody, they are clearly the objective winner of said election. Now, I do like the idea of mixed member representation a hell of a lot better, but I mean, it's not really a flaw with ranked choice voting that if someone acquires 50% or more of the vote, they win. That's just
Oh no,
an
no,
election.
I'm not trying to insinuate it's a flaw. Yeah, it's just like there are two scenarios in which ranked choice voting devolves into first past the post, and that's one of them, is when one person just straight up gets more than 50% and wins outright, despite the fact that it's still that sort of weird scenario where it's effectively a flaw of first past the post, where the person who wins 51% wins everything. It becomes a winner take all system, and that effectively still leaves up to, depending on voting percentages, up to 50% disenfranchised by that decision in its own right. But that's a flaw of not only general elections or elections in general, but it's also a flaw of first past the post that carries over onto ranked choice voting, even though it's a much better system in every other regard, with maybe the sole exception of, like, if everyone's first choice doesn't hit the margin and you end up with everyone's third choice because people disagreed on their second choice as well, there's a chance that it can end up with most people's third choice actually winning a majority, which is a really weird scenario and very unlikely, but it is possible. So it's one of the two sort of bad situations that just brings us back to where we are today. And that's something where it can be avoided, but probably only through outreach.
And
Right.
To build on Sebastian's point, what if a majority of people wanted to say again, but they're trying to help out Lisa Savage? So what if Susan Collins didn't actually get that majority vote if you counted the second choice or third choice? That's all I have to say to that.
Well, okay, but still, if you're talking about a candidate who gets 52% of the vote in the first pass, and okay, yeah, let's go down to the second round and add all of the other votes toward the second place candidate, they're still not going to get to the point where they win.
You don't know that. I'm just saying,
no, if you have 52% of the vote goes to one candidate, they won.
You don't go to the next stage. Even if you did take the second and third votes, you still can't get past the threshold. And unfortunately, that's just a flaw with how ranked choice voting works out, is that you can't really get to a second stage if one person wins outright, because it shares that quality with first past the post.
That's not a flaw. That's just the voice of the people.
Well, no, it's a flaw with first past the post systems, and in which, in general, elective systems tend to do that.
Ultimately, I know it's not the conversation today, but ranked choice voting really only works with primaries within the same party, because you don't. I wouldn't feel comfortable with ranked choice voting at a presidential level. I'm not all gung ho about ranked choice voting either, because I mean, to me, it's just I'm an abolished electoral college popular vote kind of guy, and whoever gets the most votes wins, period. You know, because sometimes ranked choice voting, you mentioned a couple flaws, but ranked choice voting can also kill populists such as Bernie Sanders, such as Donald Trump, if the parties wise up and they start giving you a vanilla second choice that they know most people will go for, that can screw over a lot of populist with strong messages in ranked choice voting. I mean, humans are corruptible, and we'll always find a way to screw with the system, so especially the parties.
Right. Not to get too far off topic, but imagine the 2016 Democratic primary if we had ranked choice voting within the Democratic Party for the presidential primary. I guarantee you the DNC would go around and start recruiting a whole boatload of people to start running. They would take one look at Bernie Sanders and say, nope, we're going to have every single other viable person run, just so we fill up the ballot with a bunch of bland centrists. That way that guy gets
what they did
no
this
votes.
election cycle too.
Yeah, but we don't have ranked choice. But yeah, essentially. That's why they ended up all dropping to consolidate, because nobody wanted to lose a whole bunch of votes on Super Tuesday, so everybody bailed out.
You know what I find?
Can I say something? But the argument about being above 51% means you automatically wins kind of applies to the mail-in ballot, because Trump was above 51%, and then when they count that vote, his lead diminished. So that's why I think we should count the second and third vote, because you don't know.
Well, no, that doesn't.
Much of a lead that they could have.
That doesn't have anything. Well, you don't certify an election until you count everything.
I know, but they don't count the second and third choice though, because they have because
No,
the person's about 50%.
Paul, it's math. It's math. If there's 52% of the vote where their first round they selected a particular candidate, that candidate wins because the remaining 48%, no matter how you slice it, if you give the whole 48% to the next most popular candidate, they still lose. Now that's
Maybe
just
it went
first
back
past the
to
post.
Martin, who knows?
No, that 52% leaves 48% for anyone else to share in the vote total. That's just how first past the post math works. But yeah,
I mean,
we've gotten pretty far off topic.
Yeah. Going back to the initial topic, I did want to tack on something that Edison just mentioned in the last time we were on the question of socialism, and he mentioned certain things. I think it was Edison, but there's like a time limit on certain problems and no time limit on others, and I think that's something that really changes how we really need to address integrating socialism into the Democratic Party and into America in general. Is that certain things we have a definite deadline on, like climate change, we're fucked if we're not basically getting many changes in 22, 24, and 26, 28. We're looking down the barrel of a gun because we're effectively looking at climate apocalypse. And it's something where if we're not really dealing with that, everything else, like, I love so many of the other reforms. Like, I would love to nationalize the energy infrastructure network and create nested infrastructure. That's not fucking happening if we're all dead. So effectively, there are certain time spans that certain things and priority levels, I guess you would have between the various implementations that should be done, but probably will not be done until we at least have enough people that are willing to challenge the entrenched economic interests.
Okay, so I want to pull us away from even mentioning Republicans and even the center swing voters at all. Just looking within the Democratic Party, there is a lot of opposition to anything progressive, socialist, anything to the left of right. They just don't want. Take Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Joe Biden, Barack Obama. All of these people, even if they ever paid lip service to the left, they're not actually interested in passing anything that is actually progressive. How do we break through that? How do we properly message against all of that, given the massive infrastructure that the Democrats have built up to make sure that something like that never happens?
Well, we have to build up progressive media. We need to make sure that progressive media can match the propaganda that's being spread by CNN and all these other news organizations. And we also have to start an education campaign about why they're not really Democrats, of how they give in to Republicans easy, starting at the local level and then building that up. We need to build a wide media network and to build a grants on campaign that can go to people and educate them and show them the facts. Because people are not going to realize that right away. It's going to take time. You have to be willing to put in that time and have to be willing to make calls to Dianne Feinstein's office, to Joe Manchin's office, to Kirsten Sinema's office. We got to have protests around the White House if Biden did something bad.
Okay, I'd like to push back on that last bit a little bit. What does petitioning folks like Dianne Feinstein do for progressives?
We need to put pressure. If we just sit around and say that Dianne Feinstein's not going to do anything, well, that's not going to do anything. I think pressure works. I think if we build enough pressure, if a clear message, we can get change.
Well, I mean, we had some very, very young protesters go and meet with Dianne Feinstein. I think they were only a little bit older than my daughter. And she basically told them to fuck off. And the shit went viral. Like, the whole world was screaming at her, like, oh my god, what the hell are you doing?
And who do you think
And
that
then
helps?
she goes in. Well, hold on. Then she goes and plays right along with Lindsey Graham ramming through Amy Coney Barrett and gives him a hug afterwards, saying this was the best judicial nomination she's ever been a part of. So obviously talking to people like Dianne Feinstein isn't really doing a whole lot for progressives or socialists.
We have to put pressure. If you just give up, then pressure's not going to work. You need to put pressure. You need to find a way to pressure O'Donnell's and say, hey, if you don't get Dianne Feinstein to get on board with this stuff, then we're going to make sure that you get attacked. Because all she cares about money. We got to target donors. We got to target the people she actually listens to. And we got to make her feel uncomfortable. If we make her people uncomfortable, I think they will give in.
Go ahead, Sebastian.
I was going to say Edison had a point, but basically, I think that we're not necessarily going to be able to move politicians anywhere, because in a lot of cases, like even in the cases we think we're making progress, there's going to be a lot of slip-ups, especially if they're not used to the terminology, the phrasing, any sort of leftist or progressive ideal. Like they're going to screw up, they're going to make bad decisions, they're going to side with people that we don't really need or want, and it's going to hamper the movement. But I don't think we should be fighting to get the politicians to move, because politicians are largely very consistent, I guess. They tend to be very stable. They tend to have very sort of established traits, trends, funding, all of the above, because especially for congressional people, they effectively have to be spending almost half their time working on the next elective cycle, because in a 2-year cycle, you're basically looking at the next elective cycle. It's even been mentioned by many House representatives and strategists that they're looking at the next elective cycle almost immediately when they come in. Like, how do I get reelected? And then the next question is, how do I serve my constituents? So I don't think we necessarily can change them as much as we can change the people in their constituencies. And that's why I think what you said earlier, Paul, with the public outreach, having a proper crew of people that goes out to the constituencies and properly sort of almost injects these concepts, ideas, and strategies into these local communities and helps working with the within this framework to move those people further left, to start demanding further left positions, means that you can set up a candidate who previously would have been very jarring and very countered by the local community, with their ideas, concepts, and labels, to be far more accepted as, oh, right, I did remember that one conversation I had with that wonderful person from the socialist movement or something, whatever the organization is called, who came by and like said some things that really made sense. And now this candidate's saying those same things. Yeah, I think I'm going to vote for that candidate. Like, just injecting small little things of being like, oh yeah, our roads are shit right now. And this person is talking about actually fixing the roads and also giving us internet. Like, we're stuck at home. This sounds really nice right now. Just start doing like the social programs combined with a local injection to at least push the voter base left, because as crazy as it sounds, the efforts of Bernie Sanders to push the electorate left were more successful in 2016 than in 2020, despite the fact that the message was significantly more widespread. And the question is whether that's a factor of the uprising of fascism, and that's effectively scaring people away from being willing to take a chance, so to speak, or whether it's a obfuscation of the message. I don't really know the answer to either of those questions, but we know that his percentages and vote totals in 2016 were significantly higher and put him within striking distance of that, despite all the rigging. It really is something that he was way closer in 2016. And effectively, I'm hoping that that's going to be the plan forward, is to effectively not only locally, but nationally, opening people to those ideas and moving the electorate left. Because, like, look at Ro Khanna. He's probably a really good example of someone who joined the Justice Democrats, still accepted corporate funding, made a lot of mistakes. Like, even in the most recent thing where the stimulus plan, he made a pretty boneheaded take in terms of like not understanding it, but Pelosi fucked that interview even worse because she didn't, like, all I can think of is if AOC was in Pelosi's place, she would have been like, okay, these are the reasons, 1, 2, 3, 4, why the Republican bill is absolute garbage. And these are the things that we were willing to compromise on. Balls in your court, you fucked up, Mitch. Like, this is sort of the basic bully pulpit, even if you're in the minority, that you would be able to explain. But it's something where, like, yeah, the people really do need a stimulus bill, but we also, being able to explain that to the common man may require a lot of like reducing and simplifying concepts just to make them feel better about it. And I think that that's really kind of crucial, is that we need to move the electorate left by offering them nice things. And as stupid as that sounds, but yeah.
May I interject,
What can-
Sebastian? So,
can I-
so before you
No,
go, Paul,
let's let Edison go ahead.
yeah, 'cause it's sort of a response to both Paul and Sebastian's comments. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself for a second, but it has to do with both of y'all. The first time I ran for office, I ran for Assembly District, for the Assembly, California State Assembly. And I was new. I didn't know anything about the party. I had just gotten into Central Committee, but I didn't really know how it went down. And the first thing that caught me off guard, the first thing that killed that campaign was my ignorance of the party system. Once you get endorsed by the California Democratic Party, you're basically a shoo-in and you get a bunch of support straight from California Democratic Party. To get that endorsement, you need to woo, in my case, 25 delegates that are elected within the party to then elect candidates and endorse them. I got 4 of those votes just because I kind of hustled, but I didn't know that. Now, when you're talking about moving the electorate to the left, it's not really about that. It's about putting the right people in the right positions. And I hate to use the word infiltration, but I do believe that progressives, leftists, and if you want to call them socialists, have to somehow infiltrate the Democratic Party in its roots. Because all these, the people you mentioned, Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, these are people who have their claws ingrained into the party, and there are many others like them at every single level of the party. So if you don't change those chips, they're going to keep endorsing the Nancy Pelosi's, all of your establishment Dems that you do not like. They're going to keep getting endorsed no matter how left the population is, how much people want Bernie Sanders. They're going to give you Bloomberg for all they care, because the people who elect and endorse these candidates are not the people. They're the people within the party. And that's what's most screwed up. Most people think, again, you can start a new media thing. You don't need a new media outlet for progressives. Progressives get all their information from wherever they need to. They don't get it from CNN. They don't get it from they get it from Democracy Now! If you want to. But we already know what we want. They're just not giving us the right people. This election cycle in particular, I had the privilege to work with Liam O'Mara. Vince also had a hand in that campaign. And he was that person who basically fought his way into the party and made sure that we had a good, strong progressive voice to run for Congress. If he wouldn't have been that person that played the party game, this other crazy right-wing, super racist lady would have been the candidate by default. So ultimately, we do have to encourage people to get involved in the party if we are to change the party, because else it's just going to be a party of establishment centrists that will not care about you. You can march outside. What do you think Joe Biden's going to do if you march outside the White House and tell him to move left? He's going to do the same thing he was planning to do beforehand. And that's the same thing I've encountered with every single elected official is they've made their minds up before they sign the bill. They've made their minds up before they walk into the office where the conversation is going to happen. So we do have to infiltrate, and we need fall guys too. Like, I lost my election this year. I'm a super conservative corner of Riverside County. I got 21,000 votes. To me, that told 21,000 progressives that there's somebody out here speaking what you want. Leo Momara lost his race too, 138,000 votes and counting. Hell yeah, people have representatives. Bernie Sanders lost as well, but he told us, like, it can be done. And the way I'm going to close this off, again, with the candidates is the people of Catalonia. It's not a real state. It's just the people in the northern part of Spain. Their flag is 5 yellow stripes and 4 red ones. And the story about the flag is that they're a people that have lost every single one of their wars. They've been shit on by the Spaniards, by the Portuguese, by the Germans. Everybody has beat up the Catalonians. And their flag is literally, their hero's hand their like national hero had a yellow shield, and when they shoved the sword through his stomach, the guy just kind of like smeared his 4 fingers across his shield. Their hero is a loser. Their hero is a guy who lost. And our hero is a guy who lost too, Bernie Sanders. He took 2 hard L's and then he bent the knee. But to all of us, he was a beacon of hope. And I think that's what we need more. We need more people to get in there and not be afraid to lose. I would have loved to be the next AOC. I know Liam would have loved to be the next AOC. She got lucky. Not all of us can, but we need more people willing to step up and speak out, because we can't do it from our seat, from our offices. We can't do it from a podcast. We can, exalt these people a bit more, but we need to throw people into the ring, or else you won't have champions, and that's how you change it.
Yeah,
Quick
I've
question.
been. Hold on, really
I
quick.
just want to ask one. Yeah.
I've been pointing this out ever since Election Day. I've been finding all of the people that are saying, oh, look, Bernie Sanders lost. It was Biden who was able to beat Trump. This is the direction that we have to take the Democratic Party. All of you progressives just need to sit down and shut up. I've been hitting back on that, saying, no, if you actually go look at places like Florida, like the furthest left candidates, sure, maybe can't win in Florida because of a bunch of systemic reasons that Edison outlined, but they got ballot measures passed that are fully endorsed by progressives. Alaska, conservative state, they just got ranked choice voting. So these things
are popular.
These things are popular. And the thing is, when you actually put it down to the people, that is the stuff that they want. And the easiest way to talk to people is locally. A lot of these city council races, you're looking at districts that only have like 2,000 people in them. You could print out a phone list and you could have 1 or 2 people call that entire list of voters over the course of maybe 3 weeks. Slowly. So if we actually start taking local offices, if you don't want to run for office, get involved with the party. If your city is big enough, I'm sure there's clubs there. Your county party, get involved with the state party. Do something within the Democratic Party. And the more progressives we get in there, that's how we start moving the whole machine to the left. That's our machine for the taking. They built it, but we can take it. Go ahead, Sebastian. Hold on. Sebastian had something he wanted to say.
Well, I guess you partially answered the question in there, and my main question is, like, when they do select these effective inter-party electors, as Edison was going on about, and getting their endorsements, my big question, I guess, was, do we replace those that they select, i.e., we run for the same positions that they're selecting from, so city council, etc., or is it something where we have to like simultaneously do that and also do effectively currying to them, i.e., we get them to shift like the smaller, more local areas if we can get them to shift positions, but I don't know if we can really get shifting of positions. So I guess it's just replacement at this point of.
I honestly think it's replacement. Yeah. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware of what a central committee is, but central committees exist in every single county party, San Diego Democratic Party, Republican County Party of San Diego, and every single county has their central committee. Central committees are elected positions. They're on your ballot for every single assembly district. So an average Joe, as long as you're registered as a Democrat, you can run for the Democratic Party Central Committee. And once you're in there, there's 7 seats per assembly district, and each one has a chair. Each chair goes to the executive board. I'm not sure who appoints the KDEM delegates, but I think it's within the central committee. They elect the delegates for each assembly district. There's some ex officios, which are the largest vote getters, but ultimately anybody can get in that position. That's the thing. Like, anybody can just put their name on a ballot. I think you need 28 signatures or like 48. It's a ridiculously low number of signatures to get on the ballot. You don't have to be friends with anybody in the party. All you got to do is say, my name is Sebastian Simon. I'm running for Democratic Central Committee, whatever your assembly district is, and you're in. You have a vote to endorse candidates in your region. If you get 6 friends or 7 friends and you all run on the ballot and you run as a slate and you put out mailers with all 7 of you guys' name on it, you can take over an assembly district. And that is so easily done. And people do it. The centrists do it. The progressives are catching on. But literally, get yourself 7 friends and run on a slate. What the Central Committee votes on ballots are ranked choice voting. So the top 7 vote getters get in. And that's how you take over. To be honest, Riverside County Democratic Party is shifting progressive slowly because a lot of people down in the desert, and I know a lot of the leadership is fairly progressive. So that's how you shift it, little by little. Disgusting incrementalism.
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah,
I mean, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, if we get more people involved in the party locally, the local decisions by both the delegates in the assembly districts and also the activity in the local clubs informs what the party does above that. So if you can get your county, including all the Democratic clubs, on the same page, then that is one giant voice to the state party. If we start moving more state parties, that's a giant voice to places like the DCCC and the DNC.
My big question then becomes, I guess, let's say your local, I keep on forgetting the name, I probably should write it down, but effectively the local election committee has 40 people in it. And currently they're all, let's go with just a hypothetical that they're in Funstein's district. I'll call her Funstein from now on, but it's they all go to her, and just sort of this hypothetical. So if you have to get, I don't know, 80% of the electoral committee's votes in order to win that district, would you have to effectively pack an additional, let's see, additional what? If there's 40, 20, like 360 people? No, not 360, a little bit less. But yeah, effectively, would you have to pack it like crazy to get enough people that effectively are not going to go for Feinstein to eventually force that percentage to flip? Or is it something where when you get put on the electoral council, you replace someone who is already there, and so you have to just replace enough people that you eventually can take that over? Or is it just straight up packing, like you want to put as many people who are going to buck that trend as possible into that electoral district? It may be state by state too. I don't know the locals for.
There's a fixed number of seats, so
okay.
All you have to do is, in the case of a California election, like Assembly, Congress, Senate, and State Senate, you do use the California delegates, and that depends on, I believe, population size. They're usually between 20-something and 40-something, and you only need 60% of that. The same sort of applies to local races. In the case like a city council, if the city council is solely within, say, Assembly District 67, then the 6 people from that central committee, which are elected positions, are on the ballot. Again, what I'm telling you, you can slate up and just take the whole central committee. those 6 people decide who gets endorsed. And depending on who gets endorsed, that means money, that means phone calls, that means texts, mailers. So the party puts full support behind its endorsed candidates. And again, if they're local races and they lie within one single assembly district, there's 7 people, who determine who gets endorsed and who doesn't.
So you'd still have to unseat that person, though. You still have to effectively run an election against them, like for seat 1, and win that election in order to unseat those. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Can I make a point about when pressure works? In 2012, Joe Biden came out for gay marriage. You don't think that put pressure on Barack Obama? And another thing is progressive groups are putting pressure for Biden to appoint progressives to his administration. The Hill reported Deb Haaland is being considered for Interior Secretary. Guess who progressives wanted for that position? That same woman. So that's the point I want to make about pressure.
I mean, my big question is effectively, and I guess this is probably a delineation, and why effectively I think by the time that we're up to a large enough percentage in both houses of Congress to consider socialism a core principle or core founding belief of the Democratic Party, my big question becomes, like, will we still have a Democratic Party at that point? Because by the time that you've effectively run this iterative cycle of incremental fixes to problems, where you've had enough people that win to effectively endorse the right people so that they get all the funding and then are properly propped up so they can win their general elections and replace, like, eventually we do get this kind of makeup. Will the party still be the party? I mean, we're still effectively well, I mean, I guess I kind of see 2 endgame scenarios playing out, and unfortunately, I don't think it's really going to be a democratic thing that they're going to do. But in an ideal scenario, Joe Biden would effectively do everything within his power, and also get the Democrats on board for this, to make Republicans electorally unviable. But then the question becomes, will the Democratic Party schism by the time that you have enough people that are at least open to socialism and those who are definitely not? Like, will you force a split in that party? Or once you eventually have enough positions within the party to effectively maintain power from people who are at least openly socialist or amenable to that, will we be in a point where we've effectively taken over the party and we can rebrand to remove the stigma of Democrat from a lot of communities across the country, that even when they see a D next to the name, immediately get some sort of emotional resistance to that change?
Yeah, so the way I see this playing out, the way I see this playing out, if we do end up infiltrating the party and moving it substantially to the left, people just aren't going to want to vote for those old style candidates anymore. They'll just naturally migrate away. Whether that's going to be a consolidation of them and whatever's left of the Republican Party at that point, or if the Republicans just fade into obscurity and now what was the Democratic Party is now split in 2 and we get what's left. I don't know if they would keep the name or we keep the name, or it's kind of irrelevant. But naturally, as you push the inside of the party to adopt more progressive principles, that's just the natural flow of how things are going to go. Those old style candidates, they're just kind of going to go someplace else. They're not viable inside the party at that point. So if they want to keep doing what they're doing, they're going to have to look for another viable way to do so.
I guess the other question I would have is do all of you think that the label of Democrat in its current state is an inherent weakness and or damaging. Like it's something where
Of course it
effectively
is.
multiple decades have tarnished it enough that it's worth discarding upon seizure of the party.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, but I do think it's more of a thing where it comes down to just like that's how all political labels are. Like, no matter what political label you attach yourself to, people are going to associate you with like literally the most insane person that they can think of with that type of example. That's why, as an argument against people who support Bernie Sanders, people will bring up people like Joseph Stalin. Oh, yeah, well, that's socialism right there. That's what I mean, and that's why like a lot of people have their go-to comparison to Trump is just to say that he's like Hitler, rather than actually like make the viable arguments where you should actually like go policy on by policy and explain your differences with somebody. You just go ahead and just say, okay, you're like the worst example of anyone who's ever ascribed to a similar political ideology on some level to yours, and that's the problem with a lot of people.
So unfortunately, a lot of politics is emotional, and policy doesn't really grab people the way that it should. I agree with you. That's, in a perfect world, that's exactly what we should be doing. Hey, so and so is terrible because of this, and that. Not, hey, that guy's like Hitler. But I mean, you do kind of see how that messaging has played out. Biden
And
did
that's the
win
thing.
because people were just so repulsed by Donald Trump. Biden didn't excite anybody, but he won because the sentiment against Trump was so bad, and it was purely emotional. There are policy reasons to not like Donald Trump, but
Exactly.
that's ultimately not why he lost.
No, and here's the thing. The reason why voter turnout was so high, I think it's a lesson that we should all take from this election. The Democratic Party is not going to take this fucking lesson, or maybe they will. But fear is more of an inspiring factor for a lot of people than actually inspiring them through policy. And we saw that especially through this election cycle, because voter turnout was not just high on the fucking Democratic Party, but it was really high on the Republican Party too. And let's be honest here, a lot of fucking people who voted for Trump, they acknowledge that he has fucking flaws. Like, not everyone just thinks that he's 100% fucking perfect, right? Like, there are some people who acknowledge, like, oh, I'm just really afraid of Biden. They're afraid of fucking Biden for a lot of fucking reasons. Probably because, like, that's what the news media tells them, because all the news media is going to do is tell you that one of these candidates is bad, and whatever one enforces the agenda that they want to push and is more closely aligned with what they want to represent, that's the person that they're going to say is good, and they're going to make the other person look as bad as fucking possible. So fear-mongering really is a more powerful tool than actually inspiring people. And we saw that in the voter turnout this election cycle.
Right, and I think a lot of that is why Paul feels that we need a media response to this. Which I do agree. Our mainstream media does a terrible job of informing the public of what's going on.
Terrible.
But at the same time, for those who are interested in figuring out what's going on, the information is there and is readily available, like Edison pointed out. We do know, as those who want to be informed, how to get informed. The thing is, most people don't want to actively get informed.
They want to be
That is what
ignorant.
we need. That's what we need to break through.
Exactly. But that's the thing. And a lot of the time, it comes down to nobody's really reaching out to these people. I mean, some people are. Some people are. I don't want to say that nobody is, but a lot of this time is that, when it comes to political dialogue, is actually spent with people who are having conversations with each other, who are already kind of like, aware of how things are going. Like, it's not about like reaching out to new types of people. It's just, having the same old conversations with people who agree with what you're saying. It's like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like a lot of it is just people get set in their ways, and they just get used to not actually going out and standing for what they believe in. I think that's a huge problem here in America, is a lot of people are just, like we live in a country where a lot of people are just fucking lazy. And that's what it is at the end of the day. A lot of people are just fucking lazy, and they're not willing to actually go outside and stand up for what they believe in. And I know, because I'm someone who's too fucking lazy to go out and do that shit myself.
And another thing is, people don't care about the facts. No matter what you say to people, people are still stuck in that bubble. People are still stuck in that narrative. Like, I got attacked for helping Trump because I pointed out that Joe Biden wanted to cut Social Security. He says, you want Trump to be elected? Why are you supporting Trump? No, I'm pointing out a flaw. Another thing we need to do is to stop people from being arrogant, for having this perspective that isn't correct. Because I spoke to those people like, but Joe Biden is perfect. He's done nothing wrong. I'm like, we need to find a way to reach out to those people who are too far gone. Because if they don't change, you're still going to be stuck with those shitty leaders. I have an off-topic question. Right now, Bernie Sanders endorsed Will Connor to be in Kamala Harris' Senate seat. I prefer Katie Porter. Who do you think should fill that seat, Will Connor or Katie Porter? That's an off-topic question I'd like to ask.
I may have an unpopular opinion on this, but I don't like the idea of pulling a progressive out of the House at all to fill that Senate seat.
Same. Even a mediocre one, like everything. It's one of those weird things where I feel like I'm kind of in a weird way, because I guess this feels like such a shitty position to have, but I'm effectively rooting for the Biden administration to fail majorly at addressing any of the systemic reforms that need to be done, in a way, because I feel like the more he underperforms, the better effective message we have as the Democrats don't have the answer. We need to fundamentally change the party into a party that has answers to systemic problems. So I think like anything that anything that effectively removes democratic power from any chamber in any way is a negative, because it's effectively allowing the Democrats to say, well, we don't have the power in this chamber anymore. It's all the Republicans who are obfuscating, and it allows them to shift blame away from themselves for being unable to deal with the exact same problems.
I think you're playing into the narrative that the neoliberals want you to have, because people already realize that they're failures, because Democrats were projected to win the Senate, and that's not going to happen. If it does happen, it's going to be narrow. When they were projected to win in Maine, North Carolina, Iowa, and I think people
so Paul, statistically, actually, the most likely outcome is exactly what we're looking at right now. A potential 50-50 split.
Yes, but they were projected to get more, and it wasn't projected to be this close. And maybe we don't get those 50 seats. Maybe the polling's off like it was on election night.
Well, no, like going back and looking at the 538 consolidation of all the polls and the projections that we were looking at for the Senate, everybody was looking at how far blue the left side of that curve was going, and I think it was like 78% likely that we were going to take the Senate, or may have been more at some point, I don't know. But each of those different bars on that graph on 538 was a different likelihood of how many seats a particular party was going to get. And the single most likely one was a 50-50 split. So the projections weren't wrong. This is actually the most likely outcome. We actually might be leaning off the right side of that curve a little bit if we do end up losing those seats in Georgia.
But Kyle Cunningham, Sarah Gideon was projected to win those Senate elections. Biden was projected to win my state, which didn't happen. I even think 538 even projected that Biden would win North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
All 538 was projecting was statistical likelihood of things happening. They didn't go in and say, this is what we believe is going to happen in any particular state. Trump had a shot of winning Florida, and Trump won Florida.
They said Joe Biden was likely to win Florida. They said that Joe Biden had like a 70% chance, if I'm not mistaken, to win Florida.
Right. So does that give Donald Trump a non-zero chance of winning Florida?
No, but still, everyone.
No, it gives
him a non-zero.
It gives him a non-zero chance, which means he has a chance. This doesn't make it wrong. that means he just hit a less likely outcome according to all the polling. But also, we're not 100% sure how accurate any of that polling was, especially given how Republicans are not wanting to talk to any of the media. How many of them do you think actually picked up the phone when any of those pollsters called them and willingly gave the correct answer to any of those questions? How many of them you think trolled the pollsters saying, "Oh yeah, I'll vote for Biden, ha ha ha"?
Exactly.
It's very possible. It's very possible all of those polls were slanted towards Biden, and we realistically should have started knocking some points off the top.
I honestly feel like the polls, it was one of many contributing factors. I don't want to make it out to be, but it's definitely one of the bigger fucking factors, I would say. It was one of the big factors in losing Hillary the election in 2016, because so many people just thought Trump had so little chance to win that they just didn't go out and vote.
Well, actually, in 2016, the way the probabilities ended up going did not look the same as Biden versus Trump. Hillary, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks prior to the election, Hillary was projected to win by, like, very big margins. The gap closed as we headed towards Election Day. And then it was kind of a toss-up by Election Day. So it's not as unlikely as people try to make it out to be, because the numbers that people often reference were early in October, not actually on Election Day of 2016.
I was not aware of that. All right, interesting.
Now, the gap did diverge this time, which should make us look back at the polling and say, maybe the input numbers were wrong. Because just laying out all of the input numbers and getting statistics on the likelihood of an outcome, we've already seen how that works. It's not that the consolidation of all the polls was wrong. I think it's more likely the polls themselves were wrong, or the prospective voters themselves were lying.
It's really hard to get an accurate read of, what is it, 140 million people.
Yeah, there's so many variables.
The best poll I saw, and it's not even a poll, it was the best prediction, was there's a Tijuana-based casino called Caliente, and you can make bets on pretty much everything in the world, including politics, except Mexican politics. So they had the Biden-Trump odds, and those shifted as we approached the election, and they had Biden up by 158. So to be honest, that's, if you want to put your hopes on something, I would look for bets around the world to see who thinks they're going to win, because casinos usually, they go for the safer bet. But otherwise, I don't trust any poll. I mean, they're just a point of reference. That's good. But as I mentioned before, the only thing you got to do if you want somebody to win, if you want Joe Biden to win, there was 1,000 opportunities to make calls for Joe Biden into Florida, Michigan, all these other swing states. There's 1,000 opportunities to call for your state senators. There's 1,000 opportunities to call for anything. If you want something to get done, you have to make calls for them. You have to knock on doors. You have to make sure that every single person that might vote for your candidate will vote for your candidate. Otherwise, you're just watching a casino app hoping for the best. But I mean, what's a poll to you?
And you can't take a break for granted.
I definitely think the casino metaphor is actually like really, really apt, and if only in the fact that, like, if you expect to win in a casino, you have to stack the odds in your favor. You literally have to cheat because the house already has its odds stacked against you, so to speak. And I think definitely the more factors that you can control, whether it be properly electing all the people that you need to get the endorsements of with an already established political mindset to then endorse the people who share that mindset, it's going to be your best bet is to effectively weight all the odds in your favor that you can to pull upsets that feel like they shouldn't be there. And I mean, polling to some extent, it's an iterative process. Every single time you poll, every single time you do projections, every single time you do statistics, you are learning from previous ones. You're going to expand and retract your various parameters and limitations and expectations to appropriately adjust for previous iterations. So you learn a little bit from each election, but you also will change your parameters and your predictive models based on what happened last time, and you get new data each section. And I definitely think at bare minimum, I wish that polling would properly be expressed and shown as percent of total electorate that's registered, because you'd be able to get a lot more data from that, if only because you'd be able to say, oh, okay, well, 58% of this electorate voted in this election period for president, but then only 36 voted for the Senate election that was up this year. Like, you can see discrepancies between the number that actually voted for someone and didn't vote at all, or voted third party, and you get a better idea. I mean, I also think that fundamentally we need to have receipts for all ballots, no matter how you voted. You get a little thing with your unique number that has your choices on it that you take back with you, just in case we need to deal with recounts and other similar situations to what happened in Debbie Wasserman Schultz versus Tim Canova. I mean, Tim Canova turned out to be a giant piece of shit, but the fact that there were missing ballots and you couldn't effectively enact recounts as needed. But I think it's something where, like, it is an iterative process, and you got to stack all of the factors you can in your favor to rig the deck to win. Like, when we look at AOC's race, she got, I think it was 10 times the initial voter outreach of previous campaigns. So it's something where, like, thinking that you can go 30% up or 40% up on a previous iteration and be okay or be safe or even have like a projected good chance of winning, I feel like that's a little naive at this point. We need to literally be looking at multiples and really doing that kind of like voter outreach, individual face to face, because as stupid as it is, like, our country is pretty shitty internet overall. And if you're not already aware of the access to leftist media, you will not consume it. Also, most algorithms seem to push people towards respective sides. Like, it tries to split the center and push it towards conspiracy theories if at all possible. So we're fighting an uphill battle, and it may actually require that face-to-face contact of actually like talking to people directly and showing that you're not a crazy Russian bot that's decided to bring Stalin's Russia for the glory of the USSR to America. Like, you're just a normal person who cares about problems that they're facing and cares about the government doing better for them. So I think, like, it's a multifaceted problem, but I think it's definitely going to not only assist with polling, at least in terms of if you stack the deck in your favor, the polls are going to start to look very different comparatively, and you can also sort of avoid getting stuck in the, oh, well, they're projected to win, so therefore they're going to, if you already know that you have all of the cards and you've already stacked that deck in your favor and you know that you're going to draw the perfect card to finish your hand and win. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. You're not dealing with games. You're actually, you've done the counting cards thing. You've won at the blackjack table. So
I want to push back on that ballot receipts thing, because ballot privacy is a big thing in the United States. I don't think that would take hold anytime soon. Having any sort of receipt or database where voters are linked with their actual vote after the count, I think that would be met with a lot of protest.
I
But
would oppose it as well. It's an invasion of privacy.
yeah, at the same time, I'm in a weird spot because I do data myself. So when you offer me the opportunity to look at the voter file in a particular area, I start looking for how many ways can I utilize this data to better target people. I would love to be able to have a better idea for how somebody voted in a particular area, because that would make my job a hell of a lot easier. I do have a lot of ideas on how to move forward with that without invading privacy, or with voters willingly giving that information up to be stored. That is a lot different than mandating it by law that we keep track of all of that stuff after the vote. That's a much larger conversation that we'll have to get into another time. But I did want to bring it back around to the question of socialism in the Democratic Party. It, from the start, sounded like we were all pretty much on the same page, where we do want to see the Democratic Party move in that direction. But I did want to ask if anyone feels like they were either informed on anything that they didn't know about before, or if they've moved on their initial position at all. And I'll start with Edison.
I haven't really moved on my initial position, although I would like to make the distinction that I'm not naming names, but some of you would like to see socialism in the Democratic Party. And I do believe that socialism has a place, but it shouldn't be the overall and governing ideal, basically. As a musician, personally, I don't see pure rock and roll as a thing anymore, pure hip hop. You know, you like something at this point in history, you can't do Chuck Berry anymore. You need to do Chuck Berry with Bangra beats and Chuck Berry with some techno bass. I believe a hybrid economic system is what we need to be pushing. We could call it something else if you like, you know, like new metal. It isn't rock and roll, it isn't hip hop, you know. It's something else, and screw new metal. But that's the point. I'm not talking about rebranding, but it's understanding what socialism is. Why, yes, some socialist economies have failed, and they failed not just because of socialism, they failed because of a million other factors. But not, I mean, Greece failed because of capitalism. We're not using like, oh yeah, you're a capitalist, just you want us to turn out like Greece. No, but they all have their flaws. We can make something better. Pure socialism does not work. No pure economic what do they call it, ideologies or system works anymore, and that's been proven. They don't work. They work on paper, but humans are corruptible, and yeah, we have to be very wary of it. I spoke about it with Fadel Kaboub some time ago when talking about getting progressives in the House, giving more power to our representatives. But at the same time, these same representatives, until you can guarantee me that you have 450 progressive minds in the House, I will not give the House any more power, because these are the same people that have been shafting us for years. So we have. I'm very weary of how much power we give to the government, and I know in socialism we do have to give some power to our representatives to then trickle down to us or be administered to us. So far, it's just been trickled down, not real administration. So until we have those checks and balances, I am weary of, again, more taxation. They have the money. They're just spending it on war. Local governments have the money. They're spending it on police. So every single social program works off the money the government has, administers to their people. So I love the idea of democratic socialism, but until we have the right people representing us, I don't see it as the most viable system for our economy, especially in the United States. That's just my final thoughts. Yes.
All right, and then I'll go to Damon.
So I haven't really changed my opinion that much, but I did find it to be like an interesting. I don't want to use the term thought experiment because that's used by chuds, but it was a good conversation, basically. And I do think that it's important to have these types of conversations, because if we never have like conversations amongst ourselves and the left, and that's really what makes it a lot different from how a lot of people on the right wing are, because a lot of people, let's be honest, on the right wing, a lot of them feel the same. There's not really a rift within the Republican Party, at least not yet, to the extent that there is within the Democratic Party. I really do not like even identify as a Democrat. I don't tag a political label or anything like that. But I do empathize more with most left wing ideas. So at the end of the day, I feel like having these types of conversations is very important. And I don't know, it just kind of reminds me that yeah, there are reasonable people who are worth having a conversation with, and it's not all just fucking crazy people on the left, right, and center. So that was good to to realize.
All right, and Sebastian?
I mean, fundamentally, I don't know if my position necessarily changed, but it's effectively gotten more small scaled and more nuanced as I've learned more about internal workings within the party. So it's something where initially it was just sort of a congressional level concept, where now it's more of like a very much a local level, local congressional district rigging of the system. And in the sense that like we're taking people who are far more amenable to the ideas of socialism and inserting them into the party and replacing people who aren't, to then replace more people who aren't and effectively infect and then just take over the party and force that concept in. Yeah, so I guess it's become more specified and more about rigging the system to our benefit versus having it rigged against us and against our benefit. So yeah, it's more of a narrowed understanding of the direct mechanisms in which that would be approached. But yeah, it's still kind of the same of like, I don't know if necessarily the label and or the policies will become fundamentally a core part of this party until we have enough individuals that not only cohesively can stick together as a unit, because I think that's also sort of a major problem, because we know the squad, but it's literally 4 out of like 538 people that we're looking at right now that have even sympathies, and all of them aren't even willing to call themselves, in many cases, socialist or even socialist leaning. The label is that absurd, apparently, that that's not even happening. So I think it's definitely it's more nuanced now, I guess. So there's definitely helpful in that regard.
And how about you, Paul?
My perspective has not changed. I still think if we attach ourselves to socialism, it's going to kill us. I still think we need Medicare for All, Green New Deal. We still fight for these ideas, but I think we have to strategically do a better job of explaining these ideas and fighting for these ideas without fighting for and saying that we need socialism. Maybe if I didn't grow up in Florida, maybe if I didn't see the craziness that I see, maybe I'd be more sympathetic. But I still think we need this progressive goals, but I think we need to do it in a different way.
And I don't think my position has changed at all either. I did a lot of research over, especially this last year, into all kinds of political philosophy. When I first got involved in politics, I was kind of center. I don't know which way I really leaned, left or right, but the left pulled me over very easily. So, and I've just been sliding to the left ever since. So, the more I look into things, the more left-wing I feel I become. So, I don't think I've really changed at all in just this conversation, but I'm constantly moving more and more to the left myself. As far as actual strategy for implementing socialism within the Democratic Party, I think I have been convinced that we do need to stop using the word socialism, and we definitely need to move towards messaging on policies rather than ever mentioning the word socialism ever again. I'm a policy wonk myself. I'll actually read bills, and I find that enjoyable. So
You madman.
Ew.
Hey, I
So,
read statistics and find it interesting. So
yeah, I'm a data guy. So I have fun programming in my spare time. So I mean, what's enjoyable for me might not be enjoyable for you. Sorry. But
I mean, I will say that if we do end up in a situation that we have enough people who are at least amenable to it, and then eventually collectively go, yeah, I guess we are. I would not necessarily be averse to that being a fundamental realization of a taken over party to go. Yeah, I guess we are socialists.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, if there's enough people that aren't afraid of the word at that point, then sure. But as of right now, I have been moved on the position of using the word at all in any type of political messaging. I think, like Paul keeps pointing out, it's poison at this point. You go out and outwardly call yourself a socialist, nobody's voting for you. Or maybe some people like myself that like to dive into political philosophy will say, hey, finally, someone running as a socialist. But you're going to get like 9 votes out of a couple 100,000.
And that, I think that was Bernie's biggest flaw, was calling himself a democratic socialist instead of a social democrat.
I even think social democrats harm. I think progressive. That's because when
I mean, a lot of people have problems with that label too, but
just like liberal a couple of years ago, it's funny because the old school conservatives will call liberals any politician or representative that wants to spend your tax dollars and raise taxes. You just described basically every progressive and every socialist around. So again, they will always demonize the labels, but I agree with Vince that it's, and again, it kind of goes to what I was saying. I wouldn't vote for a pure socialist. I would think he's full of it, and he doesn't understand that society has progressed and we need new ideas. So I kind of like what Marianne was saying, her politics of love, although it was a terrible brand, but the idea was there, a politics of empathy. You know, I'm an empathetic Democrat or something like that. You had Elizabeth Warren with big structural change. What does that mean? Ultimately, it was burn it all down and build it back up because it's not working. So I do believe we can rebrand it. Again, pure socialism doesn't work. So why use the word itself? You know, just call it. We need something new. We need something new, and that should be the conversation. That's a PR thing right there. How to
middle class Democrats who want to make your lives better.
Yeah, but Bernie's got 3 houses, so.
All right, well, on that note, I think we are going to call this one closed. We've already been going for nearly 2 hours now. I'm planning on keeping my YouTube channel actually going this time around. I got really busy working on Liam O'Mara's campaign right when I tried to fire this thing back up. So I ended up shifting off of YouTube and going toward what I felt was much more important work at the time. So as of now, I'm planning on keeping this going. I want to have one of these panel discussions, something like this, at least weekly. So if anyone out there is interested, you can find my Discord link down in the description. Go ahead and join there. Ping me if you're interested in joining in on one of these discussions. I post there all the time what videos I'm planning on releasing, what discussions I plan on having with people, so that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And you guys here, if you ever want to be involved in one of these again, you all know how to get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
Thank you
for having us.
All right, thank you guys.